I was also going to ask you, what are your thoughts on Danny Garcia's had a breakout year coming off the victory, Lucas Matthysse? Just your thoughts on Danny Garcia's big year.
Well, what's in common with all of Danny's big wins, Matthysse, is that not a lot was expected of him. He was the underdog. To me now, he's in an interesting place because he's going to be the favorite most of the time when he fights. Not if he fights Floyd, of course, but if he fights anybody else, he's probably going to be the favorite, as he was with Zab Judah. There's a different kind of pressure on you when you're the favorite. He had nothing to lose with Matthysse. Everybody was telling him how he was going to get knocked out. So let's see how he handles that pressure, because a lot of fighters, a lot of athletes perform better when they have chips on their shoulder. If that chip whittles away on Danny Garcia's shoulder, he might not be as effective. Okay. Wonderful fighter, deserves everything he's gotten. He's been fantastic.
Now, when did you first become familiar with him? How many years back? And did you ever expect this success from him? You know.
Well, I was aware of Danny Garcia when he was an amateur. He was a top amateur, of course. When he turned pro, I remember seeing him on ESPN a couple of times against Ashley Theophane and a couple of other fights. He looked like the kind of fighter that didn't wow you. You know, he didn't do one thing great. I always thought he had a pretty good left hook, some decent power, but nothing like Matthysse. No speed like Floyd or movement. There was nothing that made him stand out. But when you see him at the top level and you see him combine everything, you realize he's really good. He's a good boxer. He's got a very, very good chin. And maybe the most important thing of all, which is something to remember when he fights guys who are going to be favored over him, such as Floyd. When you're undefeated, you know, you have a certain attitude. And I think we saw that in the Matthysse fight, and that helped him win.
Now, the Matthysse fight, when that fight was signed, what was your initial thoughts, and what are your thoughts on how the fight played out?
Well, I thought Matthysse would win. I thought he'd win because Danny's defense wasn't good enough. And Matthysse, we know, can punch. But the way Danny won was quite impressive, because not only did he beat Matthysse, but he kind of beat him in his own game, in that he didn't really run, he didn't move much, he stood in the pocket, and he fought him, and he was able to beat him. I thought Matthysse was so much more improved after his losses to Devin Alexander and Zab Judah, which might not have been losses at all, depending on how you thought the fights were. But Matthysse fooled us a little bit, I think, with the Peterson fight. He was so overwhelming in that fight. And Danny Garcia didn't buy into it. We all did. Shame on us.
Okay. Now, with Danny Garcia, he said he'd maybe have one more fight at 140, but a move to welterweight appears to be right around the corner. What is just your thoughts on his future and how Golden Boy is going to try to push him moving forward?
Well, it doesn't matter to me if he fights at 140 or 147. Both divisions are loaded. There are plenty of guys for him to fight in both divisions. The fight I'd like to see, and of course this is if Adrien Broner beats Maidana, I'd love to see Danny Garcia fight Broner. Because to me, as Floyd moves on, he's going to need opponents. And the best way to create a good opponent is to have two guys fight each other that are both really good. I'd love to see Broner be the last fight in Floyd's 6-fight deal.
Okay.
You know, but if he beats Garcia, that makes a Mayweather fight that much better. If Garcia beats Broner, that makes Garcia and Mayweather that much more attractive.
Just throwing this out there, how would the pre-fight trash talk go between the wild Adrien Broner and Danny Garcia's dad, Angel? What would that be like?
I think they'd have to make All Access on Showtime a 24-hour show.
Got you. And that was the last thing I was going to ask. Danny comes across very humbled, quiet, soft-spoken. His Angel, his father, trainer, is very bombastic, loud. What is just your thoughts on their differing chemistries and their just connection as father and son?
Well, fathers generally don't work with their sons in boxing. We know that, with very few exceptions. So far, this has worked. I wouldn't mess with it. One of the reasons it works is because Angel likes to spotlight Danny. He's more quiet. But one thing about Angel that I think people have to realize is that when you see him, you think of how loud he is, you think of how vulgar he can be. Look at the job he did for the Matthysse fight. This guy's a really good trainer. He trained his son beautifully for that fight. So, to me, the proof is in the performance.